Okay, so we're going to look today in this lesson about team culture. We're going to look at ways that you can, as a manager, try and adjust and adapt your organization's culture, right? So if you're leading a team, each team has its own culture, its own kind of thing that it's known for, so to speak. There's a lot of things that go into culture, so it's kind of hard to define it. But I'll give you a few things that contribute to culture. Things like work ethic, right? Morality. Is your team known for having integrity, or we'll use sales for an example. If you have a sales team, there are some sales teams that are known for being honest and treating people fair, and then there are some sales teams that are known for being a little shady, trying to manipulate and squeeze every last penny out of someone, or maybe even outright lying to get people's money. All right, so that's a cultural issue. There are, in addition to cultural issues, we talked about work ethic. Do people show up on time? Do they give their best? Do they work hard while they're there? Creativity and innovation can be a culture. Is that embraced? The idea that if somebody makes an idea and they have a contribution that they want to put, does it get shot down, or do you give it a try, or does it at least get a fair hearing, right? So innovation. There's personality issues that affect culture. Are people more soft-spoken? Are they very brash? Are people interested in spending time together outside of the business environment? Do they have birthday parties together or things like that? Another one is the quality of work that you do, right? Do you cut corners, or are you perfectionistic? There's different levels of excellence, different levels of quality, and all of these kind of factors, these and several others, contribute to your team culture, right? And some factors may be more important to you than others. So what I want to talk about in this lesson is how do you affect the culture within your organization from a manager's standpoint, right? And so if you look at the subheading on this under team culture, I put using individual change as a way of changing the organization's culture. And so what I mean by that is that the changes that you make to your team are often best seen as an individual change, right? So I guess the idea is, as you're changing the individual people on your team, it has an effect on the overall culture of your organization, right? And so don't think of team change as this big, broad, sweeping thing, although you can have some of that at its core. If an individual doesn't change, then there is no change to your culture, right? And so what you're wanting is an overall change to your culture, right? But the way to get there is with individual change, and that as you deal with the individuals on your team and begin to get them to embrace change, then you have a more effective method of getting the entire organizational culture to change. Alright, so let's get into this. Alright, the first one there. Team culture change is a reflection of changes made at the individual level, right? So the idea here is that if you want to have, we'll take one example, if you want to have organizational excellence, that's really a collection of individual choices that people on your team are making that either make the product more or less excellent, that make their service more or less excellent, that make their hard work, their commitment, their determination more or less effective, right? And so it's really, I guess the main point I want you to see here from the beginning is that even though you care about the culture of the team in general in a broad way, the way to make changes to that is to narrow your focus down to individuals on your team and begin to help them to hone their skills, begin to help them to make changes on a personal level, right? Because change is never really, in reality, made on a team basis, right? You can't say, okay, team, do this, and it not be individual change at its core. Because even if the whole team embraces it, all that means is you've got all these different individuals now have modified their behavior, right? So it's important for the manager to not lose sight of the individual change that has to take place in order for the team itself to begin to make strides towards excellence. And so if the reason that's important is because this second line here, often what a leader will do is they'll try and make some big sweeping vision of what they want without taking the time to then go down and help the individual to become what they're wanting this new culture to be. And so what ends up happening is the manager will, give some broad thing like, I want the team to embrace excellence, right? And so then they think that because they've made that the goal for the team, that's enough. And often, if that's all you do is just say, guys, I want everybody to strive towards excellence, and you just leave it at that, and then you go on about your business and you let them do theirs, then the return you get on that is minimal. So it's okay to have that first talk and say, okay, guys, what we want to do is pursue excellence. But you can't think that just because you gave some big, broad, sweeping visionary statement that it's going to affect change on the individual level. So what you want to do is to be able to then, after you said, okay guys, we're going to pursue excellence, then go to the individuals and begin to start thinking with them and helping them to develop them with specific skills in mind that will help them to become excellent. And this is really the role of the leader, is to be able to identify what are the specific skills that you want. Because sometimes it's a cop-out for leadership to keep them from having to do like some real deep thinking or quality analysis. They just give out these broad statements. Okay, we want to pursue excellence. We want to be, family oriented, or whatever it is. And they give this kind of broad thing that may or may not ever connect on an individual level. And so as a team leader, you've got to come in and say, okay, Bob, or whoever it is you're talking to, we'll use Bob as an example. All right, Bob, you know that what we want for this whole team is excellence. And so in order to get there, I've noticed that you've been coming in sometimes about 10 minutes late to work. I've noticed that 3 times this week your products didn't pass the quality check, and so there's a couple of things here that I want you specifically to work on to help improve your contribution to overall excellence here on this team. And so it is the combination of the big vision and the individual attention that helps your team to be able to actually hit those goals, right? Because you can't skip over the fact that you've got to work with individuals, because really the excellence of the group is a function of the excellence of each individual and what they're contributing. And so as you're pursuing cultural change and cultural improvement across the whole team, you have to get very specific then. And so look at this third one. It says changes in individual process often hold the key to group evolution, right? So what that means is that there will be individuals on your team that if you can get them to change a few of their behaviors, it often has a very big effect on the group itself, right? And so, and you'd be surprised sometimes individual changes that one individual makes often begin influencing the group, right? So if the group sees that this person's always late, then you tend to have an atmosphere there that being late is okay. If nobody ever says anything to him, even if the other people on the team themselves are not late, you still have the kind of the cultural idea that, hey, well, I guess that's accepted here, right? But if you begin to change that, and the person who is late gets reprimanded and they start coming in early and on time, even though your other people were coming on time anyways, now the atmosphere, the environment, the culture, the attitude of your team is that, hey, we don't accept that here. Right? Not just that the individual who is already on time says, hey, I'm going to make sure I'm on time. They now know that the whole organization is on board, that we are going to be disciplined and we're going to do that. And then what happens is if somebody else new comes into the team, they pick up on the attitude of everyone in the team that is not accepted here, right? And so these are ways that you change the culture, that by addressing the problems of an individual, you begin to have an effect on the overall culture of the team, right? Okay. Specifics are better than broad generalities, right? So it doesn't mean that you don't need broad generalities, but you got to bring it home to your people. What do you mean when you say we want to pursue excellence? And don't just assume that they know, right? A lot of times management makes that mistake. They come in, they have a quick 10-minute meeting. Hey guys, we want everybody to give their best, right? And then they walk out. And half the people in the room that you were, the ones you were speaking to and trying to, in your mind you're thinking, man, that person really needs to pick it up and do better, right? So the manager comes in and says, you guys need to do your best, and they're talking to everybody. But half the room is hearing that and saying, well, I already do my best. So he must have been talking to somebody else, right? But maybe you were talking to them, and there's some things you wanted them to change. But from their perspective, they already were doing the best. So I guess the point there is that as a manager, don't just walk in and give some broad thing and just assume that everyone knows what you expect of them. Because a lot of times people don't. You come in, you give one of those speeches, half the people in the room that hear you assume they're doing fine, and they don't make any changes at all. So that's why you got to bring it home to them individually and have some one-on-one time with the people and tell them what you expect to see them change in order to pursue excellence. They could be your best employee, but there's still something you got to challenge them with, right? And so make sure that you get very specific with your people, right? And don't just have a talk and say, hey, Bob, that really was towards you. I want you to do your best, and then walk away, because that was just reiterating the broad generality. It wasn't giving him a specific. Giving him a specific is when you sit Bob down and you say, hey, Bob, 3 of your products this week didn't pass the inspection, right? So I'm going to have you've got to cut that down. If you have more than one next week, we're going to have to sit down and have another talk, because that is unacceptable here. So whatever you got to do to make sure that you don't have more than one product defect per week, right? So you've given Bob a specific goal, right, of what excellence means to you, right? Because Bob might have thought he was doing fine with only 3 product defects, right? So you gotta make sure that he understands what is your expectation. Or if somebody's being late all the time, you can't just come in and say, hey, everybody, we need everybody to give their best, and assume that that individual is going to interpret that as, hey, you want me to come in on time, right? So you need to sit down with that person and say, hey, I've noticed that you haven't been getting here on time, right? And we need you to not only be here on time, but we'd like you to start getting here about 5 minutes early so you're ready when we open, right? And so you've got to have that talk with them, or else they're not going to know what you mean. Or it could be an attitude thing, right? Somebody comes in and they're always very defensive and sharp, and you give some broad thing and you say, hey guys, we want to work together as a team. We want to have team unity. And you assume that the person who has the bad attitude understands that, right? But a lot of times they don't. A lot of times in their mind, they're blaming it on other people. And they think the reason they have a bad attitude is because everybody else is just giving them a hard time, right? So you got to sit down with the person with the bad attitude and say, hey, we want everybody to get along. And one thing I've noticed is that you are very defensive with the other people on this team, right? And so I need you to change some things with your attitude. You've got to stop being so snappy with everyone around you, right? You've got to speak more gently. You've got to get along with people, that kind of thing. You got to make them understand that you have some expectations of change for them, right? Because you'd be surprised the number of people, they just assume they're doing fine, and when you give these speeches, they just assume you're talking to somebody else in the room. and so they make no changes whatsoever, right? So specifics are better than broad generalities. And then the other thing about specifics is even if the person assumes you are talking to them, they may or may not know what you have in mind when you say the word excellence, right? So make sure that at some point you get very specific about your expectations, right? Okay. We often think grand sweeping vision statements will change culture, but really it is the enhancement of specific skill sets, right? So what that means is the manager may come in, like we've been saying, and give this big, broad, visionary speech and think that because they've told everybody we would pursue excellence here and we want nothing but the best, and and they've got this broad kind of vision. But they have to understand that what's going to get them there is not just saying that vision, it's helping the individual people on the team develop their skills so that they can produce excellence, right? And so don't think that your job is done because you've had a conversation with somebody. That it goes beyond just making them aware of what you expect and goes towards developing them as well. Right? So if you think that as a manager that you've done your job just because you told them what you expect, I would broaden that definition of what's expected of you as a manager and say that what you really need to do is be thinking about opportunities to develop what you want in them, right? And so it may mean that that there's some learning that has to go on. So maybe you have everyone on your team read a specific book or something like that, so that everybody's on the same page. Or maybe you send them to some kind of training seminar, or maybe you've got some practice things that you run with them, or maybe you sit down with them and give them some one-on-one coaching, or assign another team member that's been there longer or something like that to give them some coaching. But somehow, some way, you want to develop them, right? Because not every issue that you have on your team is one of attitude, right? If it's just an attitude, then they can change some of their thinking or some of their effort and begin to produce more. But what if it's just that they don't have the skills developed yet to be excellent? And so in that case, you could give them all kinds of encouraging speeches, but you didn't really change their capacity to work yet. So it's kind of a blend of encouragement and dealing with them on their attitude, but yet at the same time developing their skills so that even with a good attitude, they're able to still get the job done. So you want to be thinking not only of what does excellence mean to you and what you want your team to do, but you got to be thinking about ways you can help them to develop and improve their skills. All right. So in order to do that, though, it kind of begs the question: what changes should be targeted, right? So you've got to know that going in. What are the things I'd like to see them change, right? Maybe some of these things are going to be industry specific, right? So if you're building a specific product, maybe you'd like to see them do a certain aspect of that production a little better. If it's customer service, maybe you'd like to see them be a little less defensive, or make sure that you answer X number of calls within X number of minutes, right? So that you have some specific goals. So maybe the change might be their familiarity with the script, like if they're in a call center and they have certain scripts and certain questions that they have to ask. So maybe if they're not as productive as you'd like, maybe you need to have some type of class where you reinforce the script a little bit, right? So maybe beyond that first initial initiation, right? The first initial training that you give your employees, maybe there's some advanced classes that you send them to or you develop from scratch. But you have to be clear as a manager about what changes you want to see, right? That really helps to bring about change much faster. If you're not really sure and you just leave it on the level of being just a broad suggestion, hey, we want excellence, we want you to give your best, and you have not in your own mind narrowed down what that means, then don't expect your people to have done that, right? So as the manager, you have to make sure that you are clear about what you expect, because if not, then what's going to happen is they're going to make their own assumptions about what you think about what excellence should be, and they may make improvements in areas that that you weren't even interested in, or they may feel like they've achieved excellence and it still seems subpar for what you were expecting. So you need to be sure, and then by you being sure, you can kind of guide them a little bit and say, hey, listen, we want excellence, but what I mean by that is you've got to learn to do a better job of this, or I want to see you're already really good at this. I want you to put in some more time because you could be the best one in the whole company at doing that if you just put in a little more time at it. You seem like a natural there, that kind of thing. And so you have to be the one. Any changes that you want to see in the team, you have to be clear on what it is that you're hoping to see so that you can begin to encourage and target specific changes. All right. You have to distinguish between skills-based development and attitude development. Now this is huge because some things that you're going to run into will frustrate you because it is a personality or attitude issue, right? And some things will be skills based, right? And so skills based can be taught, right? Attitude is often caught, they say. So attitude, sometimes people refuse to change their attitude, and you can't help them. They can't be part of an effective team because of their attitude, right? Almost anyone can learn the skills typically. Now there's some things that are specialist kind of stuff, and and you're not going to be able to teach everybody the skills. I mean, some things people just can't do. They're just not gifted in specific areas. So as a manager, you kind of weigh in the balance here. What are you after? Are you after skills improvement, or are you after attitude changes, right? And those are often two different things, and sometimes we get them all mixed up, right? And we just say, hey, I want you guys to do a better job of being a team. And you've got a whole blend there of attitude issues and skill issues. And so as a manager, you want to separate those in the eyes of the people, and separate them in your discussions with people so that you don't get that mixed up, because those are two totally different types of changes. And so you need to have those clear in your mind, that what is the issue that you want to see changed. Does it have to do with skills, right? Or does it have to do with attitude? Because the approach you take with an individual will be totally different if it's skills-based versus attitude, right? Okay. Try grouping competencies into categories. So what I mean by that is, say if you found that your group is not producing products quickly enough, right? And so you realize, hey, maybe that's not an attitude, maybe that's a skills-based thing, right? That they're just not producing them quick enough because they're not good enough at doing it, right? And so, but it may not be one skill set that they're lacking in. Maybe several, right, that all contribute towards producing the product. And so you often want to group your things maybe into categories. So as a team leader, maybe you might group some, you might have, I'll just give some examples. Maybe you've got your marketing category, and you say, hey, for the most part, the team's doing pretty good, but we're really weak in this. And so I've got my marketing skills that I want to help you with. And then you say, maybe I've got some customer service skills that I want to help you with. Or, so however it breaks down in your team, maybe your team only does marketing itself. It doesn't do some of those other things. So you might say, internet marketing seems to be weak, right? And so that's my category. Right, that's my broad category I want to work on, and then within that I've got some individual skills. And so you first break down what excellence means to you in terms of categories, okay? So if it's a marketing team, you say, all right, excellence means doing good in our online marketing, in our brick and mortar marketing, and maybe in our analytics of going back in and reviewing what worked for our marketing, right? So I've got these three categories. And then I may go back in and say, okay, what are the specific skill sets that are going to help my people develop that online marketing, right? And so if you can break it down a little bit into categories, it helps you to further identify the skill sets that are specific to that change you want to make. All right. Also, having a quality acculturation process is important for initiating individual culture growth. All that means, that's a mouthful. What I mean by that is acculturation is the process of getting a new team member comfortable and aware of how you do things on your team. You acculturate them, right? And so you're trying to help them get familiar with how culture works at your team and your organization. It's really like an initiation, so to speak. They come, they get there, how you help them to become part of the team in that first week, making sure they understand why you do what you do, and helping them to understand the processes involved in your production line or whatever it is. You're helping them to get comfortable on the team there in the beginning. Thinking through that process saves you a lot of trouble down the road. If you can be very clear with new team members what's expected of them and how you do things here, and you outline it, and in order to outline it, you have to know yourself. You have to be aware of what do you do well and why does it work for you, right? And if you can identify that, then when new people come in, you can make sure that they understand that stuff off the bat. So you can eliminate a lot of your heartache with team culture by how you initiate new people onto your team. And then the last one, individualized personal improvement agendas should be part of your development strategy. What that means is for each individual, you might want to put together some kind of a plan, right? If you've got too many people on your team, this may become labor intensive for you, but if you've got a few people on your team, maybe you put together some kind of a plan. Call it a personal improvement agenda, right? Basically all that means is you actually have something in writing where you show them, hey, this is what I've identified from observing you that I would like to see you improve on, right? Something about putting it in writing helps them to realize that you're serious. It's not going to be forgotten because it's in your file. It was written down. And so there's something to psychologically to that, to showing them, hey, I have this written on a piece of paper. It's going in your file. These are the things I would like to see you improve on, right? Give them a copy of it as well. And you will find that that sometimes having it in writing causes people to take it more seriously than if it's just a passing conversation in the hallway, right? So the formalization of it, having them come in, sit down at the desk, you talk with them about it, explain your expectations, have it in writing, maybe even have them sign it so that, that's a psychological thing too. Have them sign it, that they understand what's expected of them. Tell them it's going in their file, whatever, that type of stuff. Because you want them to take it seriously, and you want them to know that you are not going to forget about what you expect of them, that you've made a hard copy of it, right? And so there's something to that helps people to become more serious and more focused on doing the types of things that you want to enhance the culture of the team, right? Okay, so the main takeaway from this lesson is that change on a big scale within a group is really a reflection of the cumulative individual changes, right? So the overall culture in your team or organization is no more or no less really than the individual decisions and skill sets that your people are making and using on a daily basis, right? So in order to influence change on a big scale, it really comes down to individual development and individual attention to the people on your team. And so don't make the mistake of thinking that just addressing the team in general is going to change the team. By and large, the most effective way is to address the team in general and then to address the team specifically as individuals, right? Okay.